Knights at the Round Table, a round-table discussion on speculative fiction books and film.
Hello everybody, welcome to Knights of the Round Table. Today we are talking about the 1999 animated movie, The Iron Giant. I am Nathan.
I am Marjolaine.
And welcome. Alright, so we're going to start with general impressions of the movie.
It was nice. It was cute. I was accidentally spoiled because the only thing I knew about the Iron Giant was the grumbling around the Ready Player One that they made the Iron Giant one of the mecha that you could fight in.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen that one either. I just heard the grumbling and that Iron Giant is a pacifist and he doesn't fight and that's the whole point. And that was kind of the whole movie.
Yes.
So yeah, accidental spoiler.
Yeah, I actually saw this movie right when it was released, and not in the theater, but at the first VHS release, as it was back then. It became like an instant classic for me. It's one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It is also my son Xavier's favorite movie ever.
Aww.
He watches it over and over and over again, so it's fairly easy for me to discuss it because I've seen a lot of it.
Nice.
But yeah, I think it's a fantastic movie. Definitely.
It's cute.
Yeah, so let's talk about this whole main theme of it. Do you want to start?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what to say because it's the whole thing of the movie that he's an amnesiac robot who's learning how to not be a fighting machine. Essentially, we learn by the end of the movie that he has the capacity, that he has all those weapons inside of him, but he doesn't want to fight people.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to kill.
So just to recap for those who haven't seen the movie, actually, this is a story about a giant robot who falls from the sky onto Earth and is discovered by a young boy named Hogarth. They form a friendship, and the robot learns to, be cool and like humans and all that, and there's an evil government agent who wants to take him down. And yeah, that summarizes the plot of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
One thing that I found interesting, especially about the evil government agent, is that they set the movie in the 50s. It wasn't shot 50; it was 1999. But it's the movie set in the 50s. It has a lot of the 50 aesthetic, and I don't think there would be a government agent villain in the 50s. I don't know the details of the Hays Code, but I don't think that would have been permitted.
Probably not.
I know it wasn't permitted in the comic books.
Yeah.
That's why they had to tweak the things for the Incredible Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
Like the army, he loses complete control, and the army genuinely believes that he's a threat, and that's why they're fighting him, even though he's a good guy. It doesn't make them a bad guy, and they had to make that obvious to be able to print the Incredible Hulk in the 60s. So I figure a movie in the 50s wouldn't have been able to pull off a government agent bad guy.
Probably not. In the 50s, they used to concentrate a lot on what was the perceived threat back then, which was communism. But what happens in this particular movie is that there's, they use that threat, and they use the aesthetic, as you say, a lot of like the Cold War back then. Like there are literal duck and cover commercials inside this movie. And you can feel a lot of like the Red Menace, as they called it back then. But the government guy, he is obviously convinced that he's the hero in this. And he comes in, and he is so desperate to like protect America against this foreign threat, because it's foreign, it's something he's never seen before, so obviously it has to be a threat. Right? And he sees that, and he pushes it from the very beginning. And he becomes so obsessed with that, and you see, like, at the very end, he's completely, off.
Yeah.
And he's going on and on about the giant, and you have to kill it, and the army is going like, well, hold on because it's a populated area and he actually calls for a nuclear strike on the town where he is to protect that town. He's literally going to obliterate everybody and everything in it to protect it. And you can see that sort of realization at the end where he's like, the army general is going like, well, where do you call the strike? And he's like, well, here, the giant. And where are we? Where is the giant? We're right here. You're going to kill everybody. And I found that interesting because it's a much more modern interpretation of, that whole area of like, basically persecuting your own people because you're so afraid of something foreign.
Yeah.
And it's a theme that's very, very contemporary right now.
Yeah.
And it was back then, like in 1999, which is 20 years ago.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm shocked because I was an adult back then and I worked at a video store. And I'm like, how can this be 20 years ago? But yes, it was very relevant back then, and it's still relevant today, unfortunately. But yeah, it's all about this perception of like, what is actually harmful and what is actually like a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And the Iron Giant itself is an exploration of that, because even though he has no speech, like the only word, he says 2 words in the entire movie, and it's Hogarth and Superman.
Mm-hmm.
So more or less.
He talks a little more. Like he learns vocabulary as it goes along.
Yeah, but mostly like he doesn't have, like, he can't have a conversation with someone. But you realize very, very fast that he was built as a weapon. He is like this huge walking gun. Even Hogarth tells him at some point, you don't have to be a gun. Because that's what he is. He responds to threat by going sort of like shutting down, and you can see like his eyes literally shutting down to become these little red pinholes, and all he can see is the threat, and he must respond to it with violence.
Mm-hmm.
But like Hogarth says at some point, you are what you choose to be. And this is really what the whole movie is about. It's about like, okay, well, how do I want to respond to this? Who do I want to be as a person?
Mm-hmm.
And you see like the Iron Giant struggling with it, and the government agent as well. Although his struggle is a little bit less of a struggle and more like a linear walking into a wall kind of thing.
Fair.
Do we want to talk about influences?
Sure. Do you have notes on influences?
I have tons of notes on influences, probably because I've seen so much of this movie and I'm a huge fan of animated movies, but there's a lot of Easter eggs in this movie. There's references to a ton of cinematic history, starting with one of the most obvious references is Bambi. I don't know if you saw this. Like at one point there's a deer that gets shot and killed, and this is the first. It's the first time that the Iron Giant is confronted, and Hogarth probably isn't confronted with death in the movie. And he explains, like, you see this deer that's been shot by a hunter, and the giant is poking at it, and is like, why is it not moving anymore? And then Hogarth has to explain to him what death is, and that the deer is dead and is never going to rise again. And to me, that was a huge, like, comeback to the first movie that taught me the concept of what death is, which is Bambi. And Bambi, the mother's death happens, like, off screen. You kind of like hear the gunshot, and then she's gone. But this one, you see the body. And there's like a huge parallel between the body of the mother, and then Hogarth gets really hurt towards the end, and he's like unconscious, and the giant has that same poking gesture.
Yeah, and Hogarth doesn't move, and he thinks
Hogarth is dead, and that's what makes him shut down the second time and become a weapon again. But yeah, Bambi was a big influence. Then you have Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky.
Which I would admit I've not seen.
Well, yeah, but the robot, he looks extremely similar to these guardians from The Castle in the Sky that is really, really, like visually very, very similar. And then you have a lot of references to E.T. in the way that Hogarth forges his relationship with the robot, you know, sort of like wandering off and like keeping him hidden and like hiding him from his parents and understanding that he's an alien, but also making him sort of understand what the world is about, and all that.
I can see that.
And then you have, as you mentioned, a lot of the movies from the 40s and 50s, you have a lot of that visual aesthetic.
Yeah.
You know, like you have a lot of, well, not just the cars and then the setting and everything, but a lot of the, like, same, like, you know, the giant robot and you know, he's eating metal. That doesn't make any sort of sense if you look at it in a scientific, like, why is he eating metal? How is he possibly getting fuel from eating metal? But if you look at it with the lens of, like, 1950s sci-fi movies, you know, big robots, they just behave like any other living creature.
Yeah. Because half the time it would be a person in a suit.
Pretty much. And he looks a little bit like that big robot from the Forbidden Planet, too. Anyway, I have a lot of like, oh yeah, this and that.
Yeah, that's clever. I missed the only one of those things I've seen really, except for a couple of 40s, 50s movies. It was Bambi, and I didn't make the Bambi connection. Maybe because it was there, but it was more oblique.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of the settings that were also like painted the way that Disney movies were painted back then.
Oh yeah.
Like if you look at things like Seven Dwarfs, Snow White. Thank you. It's like there are dwarves in this movie. Yes, there are dwarves in this movie. Like you have a lot of this like watercolor backgrounds. Like I went to see the Disney exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal a few years back, and you could see a lot of these backgrounds. The way they're painted, they're like these really nice watercolor canvases and all that, and really complex. And that's the way the backdrop of this movie looked a lot of the time. Like you didn't have these like really, you know, line art colored in that or like splashes of solid color that you see. You could really see the work, the watercolor and everything.
I appreciate that it's a 2D animation.
Yes, it was one of the last really big 2D animations before like people started doing a lot of 3D.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think this was this director's last 2D animation because he went on to do The Incredibles after that.
Oh.
Oh, Sonia's mind was just blown. I have an actually a piece of trivia about this because I watched this and then I watched The Incredibles because my kids love both of these movies. And these two old guys, which I later found out are representations of two of the original Disney, like the big 9 animators that did most of the big Disney movies. They're pictures of these two. And there's the guys who are saying like, oh, old school, you know, like there's no school like the old school. In The Incredibles, they're also in The Iron Giant talking about old school stuff. And, like, the first time I saw it, I'm like, hey, look, it's the same two guys. And then I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it's actually these two animators from the Disney era.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so he did The Incredibles, and then he did, oh my god, I cannot remember now. Ratatouille. After that.
So it was Iron Giant, Incredibles, Ratatouille.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see the influence in like the way the Incredibles are designed.
Yeah.
From this animation. Yeah.
The Incredibles also has a bit of a retro feel.
It definitely does. Mm-hmm. And that's why the, you know, old school comment is so relevant because they both have like a very retro kind of aesthetic from the 50s and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, well, The Incredibles is more like the 60s, but it's still like that retro feeling of the old sci-fi movies from the olden days.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna let you talk a lot apparently because I don't. I like the movie, but I didn't think about it that much. It was just, yeah, okay, it's cute.
I have to admit, I knew I was going to head this panel, so I made a bunch of notes yesterday, and I was like, okay, because I have no memory, or else I will forget everything. Yeah, so you have a lot of themes of identity in that movie, and well, especially well, like, you know, you're meant to do something, and you can choose to do whatever you like. You see that a lot in the giant itself, of course, who's made to be a gun but learns to be a pacifist. But you see it also in Beatnik Dude.
Oh yeah, the guy who owns the scrapyard.
Yeah, the guy who owns the scrapyard. You know, he should be a mechanic and all that, but he's an artist. And I really love that whole scene where, like, the giant, they drive the giant to the scrapyard because this guy is friends with Hogarth for no reason.
No, it just happened, like, and it was like 48 hours earlier that they met for the first time.
Yeah, exactly, and now, like, they're best friends. But, yeah, so he brings the giant to the scrapyard to, like, feed him because he eats metal. So he's like, oh, okay, well, you can eat all the metal you want here. And then I think his name is Dean.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
Dean.
so anyways, so Dean is like, well, you can eat that. You cannot eat that. That's art. Put it back down.
And then he does, and he tries to fix it. And
Yeah,
he's like, actually, that's not bad.
yeah. And that's cool because when the government agent guy, like, brings the whole army to his place, he's like, look, I found the giant. And Dean is like, yes, my latest work. Isn't he magnificent? And he's put all the scaffolding around like he's a sculpture.
And a bunch of other scrap on top of it to try to disguise it a little bit and make it look more like a junk statue.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Oh yeah, it's really really great. But yeah, people in this movie, there's a lot of expectations that are, undone. Like, Hogarth is the son of a single mom, which was not a very common thing back then.
No.
And then she takes the government guy as, what do you call it?
Renter.
A renter, yeah, like, exactly, a tenant.
A tenant.
And then I kind of love this whole showdown between Hogarth and government guy, where, like, the guy is like, you're gonna take me to that robot, and I'm gonna watch you until you do. And there's this whole scene where, like, Hogarth is just sitting in his bed like this, with a helmet.
Oh, that's not when he's gonna take the robot. It's like, the army is coming, and you're not gonna go out and give warning to wherever the robot is.
Yeah, that's it,
And
that's
then
it.
it's like, he nailed Hogarth's door shut, or the window shut, and, like, he's standing in the corridor, and then in his room with both doors open, and he's like, and then it's like,
Showdown.
Showdown.
Yeah. And then he pretends to go to sleep. And then, like, the next morning, government guy is just, like, sitting there and he's sleeping, and Hogarth comes in, he's like, hey! And then he wakes up, and it's, like, just pillows in Hogarth's bed, and he's like, what? How did you... What? Yeah, it's pretty great scene. There's a lot of
It's
really
interesting.
amazing scenes in this movie.
Now I'm thinking about it, the single mom and the way Hogarth tricks the security agent. It reminds me a lot of the sort of thing you'd see in the late 70s or 80s movies.
Yeah.
So it's like a different kind of retro than the one the movie is set in, but it's still retro,
But
even to the time the movie was made.
A lot of the 80s movies, and this is like a thing because we're living in an age right now where everything is a remake of something. And you can see sort of the waves, and a lot of the 80s movies were set in the 50s and 60s. And now we have a lot of movies that are set in the 70s and 80s. And like it's sort of like it goes by waves like this, and it has a lot of the 70s and 80s themes, but on the 60s and 50s backdrop, which I find really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, you have a lot of that theme about how identity is, it's a choice that you make.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciated that in that movie.
Yeah. And it's a good, well, I guess it's a pretty typical message and aesthetic to have for a children's movie, especially one with children protagonists, because it's the coming of age story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
Like, you figure out, okay, you're put with it, your world changes, and now you get to make the decision of how you adapt to that change, and that's a metaphor for growing up or whatever.
And I really like children's movies that don't have like romances, and you know, like you could maybe imagine sparks between the mom and Dean and everything, but it's really not.
Yeah, except that she does call him sweetie at the end, and it's clear that they're together. It's there.
Well, yeah, but it's not like you don't feel like there's not a whole romantic sequence of like them falling in love and it's important to the plot. It's just like, no, like, you know, whatever, it's there, but it's not
but
like.
If it was gonna be there, maybe build up wouldn't have been such a bad thing.
I don't know. I like the way that you can say like, okay, well, maybe they're together, maybe they aren't. In my headcanon, they're not.
In my canon, that's based on what's portrayed on screen, they are. And then I would have liked a little more build-up, please. Or cut that line that puts them together.
I don't know. She's a waitress. She calls people sweetie all the time. And I'm just thinking about that very first scene where you meet Dean for the very first time, and you have that squirrel that runs up his pant legs, and he's just going like crazy and standing up in the middle of the restaurant where she's working and opening his fly, because that's where the squirrel comes out. And I was like, wow, that's kind of racy for kids.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think we could move to
Yeah, you can wrap it up.
impressions, global impressions star rating.
My global impressions haven't changed that much from the first impression. I still think it's cute. I like the messages that we discussed here. I wish that romance wasn't there, or that it was there better. And all the stuff that I didn't know, that was a lot of fun to talk about. 3 out of 5, maybe. It's not a bad movie. It's very cute. And there's a lot of cool stuff, but it's a kid's movie.
Yes, it is a kid's movie, and it's probably one of my favorites. I'm very, very glad that my son loves it so much, because I never get tired of this movie. It's still like emotional for me. I'm a sucker, and I'm just gonna say 5 out of 5 because I love it.
Okay, so next one.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna.
Yeah. That one. Oh, this one has a date.
Ooh, a date.
The Craft, 1996.
The Craft!
The
Oh my
Craft.
god, I just watched this week.
Perfect for October.
It is!
Oh my
It is!
God.
It's a perfect Halloween movie.
It is.
Excellent.
And they're remaking it too. I know. You never know. It might be good. Who knows? All right.
Original Hollywood.
So next time we will stream, we will talk about The Craft 1996. Stay tuned for the last panel of the day, which will be about The Reluctant Barbarian by John Hass. And see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.